Starbucks just lost $892 million in 2025, and their profits got cut in half. Operating margins in North America crashed from nearly 19% down to just 4.5%. What makes this story so compelling is that these aren't the desperate moves of a failing company. This is a coffee giant voluntarily burning nearly $1 billion to save its soul. Let me walk you through exactly what happened and why Starbucks chose to essentially light this money on fire, because the numbers I'm about to share tell a story that goes way deeper than simple corporate restructuring. Fiscal year 2025 wrapped up on September 28th, and Starbucks pulled in $37.2 billion in total revenues. That's actually a 3% bump from the previous year, which means they're making more money than ever. But here's where things get wild. Despite bringing in more cash, their net earnings dropped by more than 50%. They made more money, but kept half as much of it, like getting a raise at work but somehow ending up with less money in your bank account. The fourth quarter results came out on October 29th, 2025, and revealed just how brutal this really was. Operating margin contracted by 710 basis points for the full year, which is a 7.9 percentage point drop in profitability. Picture running a business where you used to keep 18 cents of profit from every dollar of sales, and now you're only keeping about 11 cents. For a company the size of Starbucks, every percentage point represents hundreds of millions of dollars walking out the door. North America alone absorbed $628.7 million in restructuring charges during the fourth quarter, and the operating margin collapsed from 18.7% to just 4.5%. That's not a gradual decline, that's falling off a cliff. Earnings per share plummeted 85% using standard accounting, and even when you strip out the one-time costs, they still dropped 35%. An 85% drop in earnings per share is the kind of number you see when companies are genuinely failing, when business models are collapsing. This would typically send investors running for the exits and trigger emergency board meetings. So what could possibly justify such massive financial pain? The answer is something Starbucks calls the Back to Starbucks transformation strategy, and it's one of the most ambitious corporate reinvention efforts we've seen in years. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Starbucks had become versus what it started as. When Howard Schultz originally built Starbucks into a national phenomenon, the concept was beautifully simple: create a third place between home and work, where people could enjoy exceptional coffee in a welcoming atmosphere. Stores were designed as comfortable community spaces. Baristas were trained extensively in coffee craft, and the menu was focused. Every detail reinforced the premium coffee experience. Over 2 decades, Starbucks evolved into something much more complex. They'd become part coffee shop, part fast food restaurant, part mobile ordering platform, and part delivery service. Each expansion made business sense individually, but collectively, they diluted the original concept almost beyond recognition. The transformation strategy revolves around 3 main pillars. First up is massive store closures. We're talking about 627 stores during this period, mostly in North America. Each closure means lease termination costs, employee severance, asset write-downs, and the complete loss of future revenue from those locations. And when you multiply these costs across hundreds of locations, the numbers explode. Some closures targeted locations that were simply too close together, because in urban markets, Starbucks had sometimes opened stores within sight of each other, creating internal competition and operational redundancy. Other closures focused on formats that weren't working anymore. Stores in locations that made sense 10 years ago but don't match current customer traffic patterns. The second pillar is operational simplification, and this addresses what might be the core problem. Over the years, they'd piled on elaborate food programs, complex seasonal drinks, mobile ordering systems, delivery partnerships, and countless other initiatives. Each addition seemed smart at the time, but collectively, they'd created an operational nightmare that was drowning stores in complexity. Baristas weren't just making coffee anymore. They were managing complex food orders, handling multiple ordering channels simultaneously, customizing drinks with dozens of modifications, processing loyalty rewards, and trying to maintain welcoming service. Customer wait times were stretching. The simple pleasure of ordering coffee had become unnecessarily complicated, and error rates increased while employee satisfaction decreased. The experience became stressful rather than enjoyable, and customer satisfaction suffered as a result. The simplification process means ripping away layers of complexity and refocusing on what made Starbucks successful originally, but simplification costs money up front. You've got to retrain staff, redesign processes, update technology systems, and sometimes completely overhaul store layouts. And in a company of Starbucks' scale, these investments run into hundreds of millions of dollars. The third pillar is what they call a foundational reset. And this is the most ambitious part. Starbucks is trying to return to its core identity as a premium coffee experience rather than the fast food adjacent operation it had gradually become, which means changing everything from supplier relationships to staff training to customer experience design. This means going back to more direct partnerships with coffee growers and focusing on bean quality over cost efficiency. Staff training gets overhauled to emphasize coffee craft and customer connection rather than transaction speed. The customer experience gets redesigned from the ground up. The $892 million restructuring bill covers all of these changes: store closure costs, operational simplification expenses, severance payments, asset write-downs, and countless other expenses that come with fundamentally changing how a massive corporation operates. Quick note, if you're enjoying this analysis, subscribe to the Corporate Backdoor for more deep dives into corporate strategy that goes beyond the headlines. Let's continue. So what does this transformation actually look like when you walk into a Starbucks today? Because these aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real changes happening in real stores with real employees and customers. The menu simplification alone represents a massive shift. Starbucks had gradually built up a menu so complex that baristas needed multiple screens just to navigate all the options. Seasonal drinks came with elaborate preparation requirements, food items required precise timing and coordination, and customization options had exploded into hundreds of possible combinations for a single drink order. Now they're stripping that back. The goal is a menu that customers can actually read without feeling overwhelmed, and that baristas can execute consistently without drowning in complexity. That means cutting items that don't sell well enough to justify their operational burden. It means standardizing preparation across drinks so baristas aren't constantly switching between different procedures. It means reducing the cognitive load on both sides of the counter. Walk into one of the stores that's completed the transition, and you'll notice the difference immediately. The menu boards are clearer and easier to read. The baristas seem less frazzled because they're not juggling 17 different tasks simultaneously. Wait times have come down because the streamlined menu moves faster through production. The store redesigns tell another part of the story. Starbucks is investing in making locations feel more like the original concept, that third place between home and work. More comfortable seating, better lighting, materials that create warmth instead of the sterile feel some locations had developed. They're trying to recreate the atmosphere that made people want to sit and stay instead of just grabbing coffee and leaving. The labor investment is equally visible. Adding assistant managers to stores means there's actually someone available to handle operational issues, while baristas focus on making drinks and serving customers. Increasing labor hours means stores aren't constantly running on skeleton crews where one rush period throws everything into chaos. These changes sound simple when you describe them, but implementing them across thousands of locations while keeping stores operational is extraordinarily complex. Every store needs retraining on new procedures. Every location needs to phase out old menu items and introduce new simplified offerings. Every team needs to adjust to new staffing models and operational rhythms. The technology side is getting overhauled too. Mobile ordering created convenience for customers, but chaos for stores, when dozens of orders hit simultaneously with no warning. The new systems are designed to better manage order flow, giving stores more control over when mobile orders come through based on their current capacity. Better integration between ordering channels means baristas can see everything in one place instead of checking multiple screens. Even the supply chain is being simplified. Fewer menu items mean fewer ingredients to manage, less spoilage, simpler inventory management. Stores don't need to stock as many different syrups, toppings, food items. That frees up storage space and reduces the complexity of managing what needs to be ordered and when. For employees who've worked at Starbucks for years, these changes represent both relief and adjustment. Relief because their jobs are genuinely becoming more manageable, less overwhelming, less likely to burn them out. Adjustment because they have to unlearn old procedures and adopt new ones, which always creates friction even when the new way is better. For customers, the experience varies. Regular customers who always ordered the same simple drinks probably notice faster service and friendlier baristas who aren't stressed out. Customers who loved elaborate seasonal drinks or obscure customization options might feel disappointed by reduced choices. The bet Starbucks is making is that better execution on core offerings matters more than maximum variety. But here's what makes this fascinating. Starbucks isn't a company in crisis trying to avoid bankruptcy. Revenue is growing, they still have enormous brand recognition and customer loyalty, and they could have kept operating as they were, probably staying profitable in the short term. Instead, they chose to inflict this financial pain on themselves voluntarily. This decision reflects remarkable long-term thinking, because leadership concluded that their current path of increasing complexity, declining customer satisfaction, and operational inefficiency would eventually lead to much bigger problems. Rather than wait for a crisis to force changes, they chose to create their own crisis and control the transformation process, like choosing to undergo major surgery while you're still relatively healthy, rather than waiting until you're in the emergency room. Think about the courage this required. When you're the CEO of a public company, your job is often seen as maximizing quarterly earnings and keeping shareholders happy. So choosing to cut profits in half and absorb nearly $1 billion in restructuring costs goes directly against those short-term pressures. Yet Starbucks leadership decided the company's long-term health mattered more than short-term financial performance. The human cost shouldn't be overlooked either, because when you close 627 stores, you're affecting thousands of employees. Even with severance packages and efforts to relocate workers, this represents serious disruption in people's lives, and some employees might have been with their stores for years, building relationships with regular customers and becoming integrated into local communities. Starbucks has tried handling these closures responsibly by providing advance notice where possible, offering transfers to nearby locations when available, and providing severance packages that exceed legal requirements. But for employees who've worked at these stores for years, the closures represent genuine loss. Financial markets have watched this transformation with mixed feelings, because investors generally hate seeing profits disappear and massive restructuring charges hit the books. The stock price has reflected this uncertainty with significant volatility as investors try figuring out whether this strategy will work. But many analysts recognize that Starbucks was facing real operational challenges that needed addressing. Customer satisfaction surveys showed declining scores, store efficiency metrics were heading the wrong direction, and the complexity was creating inconsistent experiences across locations. From this angle, the Back to Starbucks strategy represents necessary medicine, even if it tastes bitter short-term. The timing adds another layer of complexity, because Starbucks chose to undergo this painful process during broader economic uncertainty, with inflation affecting consumer spending and labor costs rising across retail. This timing makes the transformation more difficult since consumers are more price-sensitive, and finding good employees is harder. But there's an argument that this timing makes the transformation more necessary. Because if economic conditions are going to pressure profit margins anyway, it might be better to address operational inefficiencies now rather than later. By simplifying operations, Starbucks may be better positioned to weather future economic storms. Now let's talk about early signs of whether this strategy is working, because despite all the financial pain, there are encouraging indicators emerging. Most significantly, Starbucks experienced global comparable store sales growth in the fourth quarter of 2025, the first time in 7 quarters they'd achieved this metric. Comparable store sales growth is a big deal in retail because it measures whether existing locations are generating more revenue year over year, excluding new openings or closures. When this number is positive, it suggests the underlying business is healthy, and customers are visiting more frequently or spending more per visit. The fact that Starbucks achieved comparable store sales growth for the first time in 7 quarters suggests the operational changes are beginning to resonate with customers. Maybe the simplified menu is reducing wait times, or perhaps the renewed focus on coffee quality is improving the product experience, or possibly the streamlined operations are enabling better customer service. Looking ahead to fiscal 2026, Starbucks expects to incur approximately $230 million in additional restructuring costs, which tells us the transformation is far from complete. However, management has indicated they expect the overall impact to be slightly positive for operating margins in the coming year, which would represent the beginning of financial recovery. This projection matters because it suggests the benefits of simplification and operational efficiency are expected to outweigh the remaining costs. If accurate, it would validate the strategy and provide evidence that short-term pain is leading to long-term gain. The path from where Starbucks is now to where they want to be isn't going to be quick or simple. Management describes this as a multi-year turnaround, which is corporate speak for this is going to take a while and won't always be smooth. Fiscal 2026 becomes the crucial test period. The store closures are mostly complete, so that drag on operations is largely behind them. The menu simplification will be fully implemented across the system. The labor investments will have been in place long enough to see if they actually improve execution. The store remodels will be showing whether the new design approach resonates with customers. But fiscal 2026 also brings new challenges. The labor investments that are improving service are also pressuring margins, and those costs don't go away. Coffee prices have been volatile, and management expects that to continue being a headwind at least through the first half of the year. Tariffs and broader economic conditions create uncertainty that makes planning difficult. The competition isn't going to sit still either. While Starbucks was focused on internal transformation, competitors were building momentum. Regional chains expanded their footprints. Local coffee shops carved out loyal customer bases. Fast food chains improved their coffee programs. Winning back customers who switched to alternatives during Starbucks' rocky period won't be automatic. Technology investments need to start paying off. Starbucks has been pouring money into digital infrastructure, mobile ordering improvements, and operational systems. These investments make sense strategically, but they increase costs in the short term, while benefits come later. The timing of when those benefits materialize versus when the costs hit matters enormously for financial results. International markets present both opportunity and complication. The transformation is focused heavily on North America, because that's where the problems were most acute. International operations, especially in markets like Japan, the UK, and Mexico, have actually been performing well. China represents a separate strategic question entirely, with Starbucks exploring potential partnerships to navigate that competitive market. The customer experience improvements need to translate into measurable loyalty. Getting 90-day active Starbucks Rewards members to grow is encouraging, but the real question is whether those customers are visiting more frequently and spending more per visit. The rewards program provides data that Starbucks can use to understand customer behavior, but only if they actually change behavior does the transformation succeed. Employee retention and satisfaction will determine execution quality. If the operational simplification and increased labor hours actually make jobs better, turnover should decrease and service should improve. If employees still feel overwhelmed or underpaid relative to the work required, the transformation won't stick, even if the strategy is sound. Happy employees create happy customers, and unhappy employees can undermine even the best strategic plans. The financial recovery won't be linear. Some quarters will show encouraging progress, others might disappoint. Unexpected events, economic shocks, competitive moves, execution stumbles, all of these can cause setbacks. The question is whether the overall trajectory points towards sustainable improvement, or whether this expensive bet fails to pay off. Starbucks has set expectations carefully, describing this as a multi-year process and avoiding specific near-term guidance that gives them room to navigate challenges without constantly missing targets. But it also makes investors uncertain about when they should expect to see real results. The Investor Day scheduled for late January will provide more details on what management expects and when. The brand itself needs rehabilitation in some ways. Starbucks spent years building an image as a premium coffee experience, but operational problems damaged that perception. Some customers now see Starbucks as overpriced and overcomplicated rather than premium and craft-focused. Rebuilding brand perception takes time and consistent execution. You can't just announce a strategy and have people's opinions change immediately. The test will come in sustained execution, over quarters and years. One quarter of positive comparable store sales growth is encouraging, but doesn't prove anything definitive. Maintaining that growth while improving margins, that's what success looks like. Growing both customer traffic and average ticket, that shows the strategy is working on multiple dimensions. The competitive context makes this even more interesting, because while Starbucks has been undergoing this expensive transformation, competitors have been trying to gain market share. Some have focused on speed and positioned themselves as the faster alternative, while others have emphasized value by offering similar products at lower prices. Regional chains and local coffee shops have highlighted quality at better prices. The success of the Back to Starbucks strategy will partly depend on whether it enables effective differentiation from these competitors. If simplified operations lead to faster service, and renewed focus on quality leads to superior products, and streamlined experience recreates the atmosphere that originally made Starbucks special, then they may maintain their premium positioning while improving efficiency. But if the transformation doesn't deliver clear benefits to customers, or if competitors continue gaining ground while Starbucks focuses internally on restructuring, the strategy could prove an expensive mistake. The next few quarters will be telling. The financial structure of Starbucks has also shifted during this transformation, with total liabilities reaching $40.11 billion at the end of 2025, up 3.4% from 2024. This increased debt burden reflects both direct restructuring costs and the impact of financing the transformation initiative. Higher debt levels mean higher interest expenses that will pressure profitability even after restructuring costs end. However, if the transformation succeeds in improving operational efficiency and revenue growth, the company should generate sufficient cash flow to manage this debt load comfortably. From a broader industry perspective, the Starbucks transformation is being watched closely by other retail companies facing similar challenges, because many large chains have struggled with the same issues of operational complexity, declining efficiency, disconnection from core brand identity, and difficulty maintaining consistent customer experiences across thousands of locations. If the Back to Starbucks strategy succeeds, it could become a model for other companies undertaking similar transformations, because the willingness to accept short-term financial pain for long-term strategic goals represents corporate courage that's often talked about but rarely implemented at this scale. What makes this story ultimately fascinating is that it represents a fundamental question about business strategy in the modern economy. In an era when most companies focus intensely on quarterly earnings and short-term stock performance, Starbucks chose to prioritize long-term strategic positioning over immediate financial results. This decision required enormous confidence in their analysis of what was wrong and what needed fixing. It required courage to disappoint investors and analysts short-term while working toward better long-term outcomes, and it required exceptional execution skills to manage transformation of this complexity without completely disrupting operations. The story also highlights the challenge of managing growth in large organizations, because Starbucks didn't set out to create an overly complex, inefficient operation. Each individual decision, like adding a new product line, implementing new technology, or expanding into new market segments, probably made sense at the time, but collectively these decisions created the complexity that now requires such expensive simplification. It's a trap that many successful companies fall into. Success enables growth, growth demands more offerings and more complexity, and complexity builds on complexity until you're so far from your original concept that customers and employees alike are confused about what you actually stand for. For anyone watching this story unfold, there are broader lessons worth considering. First is the importance of long-term thinking in an era dominated by short-term pressures, because Starbucks' willingness to accept immediate pain for future benefit runs counter to much of what we see in modern business culture. Second is the value of returning to core principles when facing challenges, because rather than trying to innovate their way out of problems with new initiatives and additional complexity, Starbucks chose to rediscover what made them successful originally. Third is the courage required to make difficult decisions when they're needed, rather than when they're forced by crisis, because many organizations wait until they have no choice before making major changes, while Starbucks chose to create their own deadline and control their transformation process. The question of whether this $892 million bet will pay off remains unanswered. Will the Back to Starbucks strategy successfully return the company to sustainable, profitable growth while recapturing the customer experience that originally made them successful? Early signs are cautiously encouraging. Comparable store sales growth has returned. Management expects operating margins to begin recovering in 2026, and the operational simplification appears to be progressing according to plan. But the true test will come over the next several years, as transformation costs fade and benefits become more apparent. The retail landscape continues evolving rapidly. Customer expectations keep changing, competition remains intense, and economic conditions create ongoing uncertainty. What we can say with confidence is that Starbucks has chosen a path requiring exceptional execution and considerable patience from investors and customers alike. They've bet nearly $1 billion that returning to their roots and simplifying operations will create more value than continuing their previous trajectory of increasing complexity. This isn't just about coffee or retail operations. It's about the fundamental challenge of staying true to your mission while adapting to changing circumstances. It's about the courage required to make difficult decisions before they're forced upon you. And it's about the delicate balance between growth and sustainability that every successful organization must master. The next chapter will be written in the quarters and years ahead as we see whether Starbucks' massive financial sacrifice translates into the operational excellence and customer satisfaction they're pursuing. Whether this strategy succeeds or fails, it represents one of the most ambitious corporate transformations in recent memory. A billion-dollar bet that sometimes the best way forward is to go back to where you started. That's the story of Starbucks' billion-dollar transformation. Here at the Corporate Backdoor, we unpack the business strategies and corporate decisions that actually matter, going deeper than the surface-level news coverage. If that's your thing, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let me know in the comments what you think about Starbucks' chances of pulling this off. See you in the next one.